Good evening, and thank you all for joining us at the 12th edition of the Spain Investors Day. The closing session is about to begin. I now give the floor to the President of the Spain Investors Day, Benito Berceruelo.
Buenas tardes, Presidente del Gobierno, Secretaria de Estado de Comercio y Presidenta del ICEX, Secretario General de Asuntos
Secretary General for Economic Affairs, President of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, investors, company representatives, dear friends. At Estudio de Comunicación, which is the institution that sponsors this event, we help companies communicate with the different target audiences. And to be honest, we have worked very hard in the last year to overcome a very difficult crisis. But when we founded our company, we were also in the midst of a very, very difficult crisis in the times of Felipe González. I would like to mention a very important difference between both crises. In this current crisis, we have had solidarity as a very important element. In other crises, there were many companies closing down. But in this crisis, we have seen that many companies from the outset didn't hesitate that the important thing was not the P&L. The important thing was helping people. And what people say about corporate social responsibility acquired a very important value. So my first message to the investors following us today is that Spanish companies have really bought into CSR. Spanish companies have bought into sustainability and good governance, and they have shown it during the pandemic because they have not hesitated to help their stakeholders, and it's been a reason of pride for them to do so. This forum, as I was saying, was also started at a time of a crisis, the day before the intervention of Ireland. And in those days, Spain was also at risk of being intervened. So several companies thought that we had to take a step forward. We had to go out to defend our country and defend our companies. And I want to mention BNP Paribas, Deloitte, Endesa, Aon, Prisa, Linklaters, Equipo Económico, ICEX, ICO, and Cofidis. And I want to mention them because all of them have worked in a self-denying way to help Spanish companies convey a good image of their country. And they do so convinced that this is something that should be done, and they've done it in a very excited manner. And I would like to devote 30 seconds to say something which is quite important to me. 44 listed companies had 800 one-on-one interviews with international investors from 13 different countries, amongst them the UK, the US, and France. And in this effort, BNP Paribas has done a great job. Thank you very much, Cecilia, for this work, because you are a truly committed company. You were in charge of matching companies with prospective investors. Yesterday, Minister Alvarez was saying in his words that the best example of a developed country is that it had strong institutions and a strong civil society. And this event is an example of that, because it's a very good example of a public-private partnership which now has the support of public institutions such as ICEX, Cofidis, and ICO. Many people have asked me, as chairman of the Spain Investors Day, what investors are asking of Spain. So I'm going to be devoting a couple of minutes to summarizing what investors are asking. The first thing they're asking is that we should be true to our principles. We should be true to the values that Spain enshrines. And also, they're also asking us, and I'm sure that they're asking other countries too, that we should improve a couple of things, because of course you can't be perfect. And what are they asking us to improve? Well, the first thing is that when people invest, they want to invest in an honest country. So they're asking us to keep fighting corruption with tooth and nail. The government should not condone corruption in any of its forms. And, you know, if somebody does something awry, he or she should be punished. They're also asking us to keep working on improving our justice system. But I don't think that investors are skeptical about legal certainty in Spain. But it has to be said that sometimes the legal system may be too slow. So I think that a legal system or courts should be faster so that people have no problems with that. They're also saying that Spain is a small country, and so they're asking that we should preserve the single market and we should try and increase the size of our companies, because Spanish companies are still small and we want them to be a little bit bigger. They also want us to be foreseeable. They want us to be as good as a word, because that is a factor that helps investors trust a country. It is also important for our stock market to grow, and the president of the CNMV was saying this yesterday in his comments in the afternoon. We need for the stock market to be stronger because investors trust listed companies more because they are more liquid, they have a stable price, and because the stock market exercises controls that makes companies more rigorous. They're also asking for the European funds to get to the real economy as soon as possible. The Secretary General knows how I admire his work, because people who receive these next generation funds will probably think they deserve them. But of course, investors, and I know you're working on this, want these funds to reach companies as soon as possible. And I also want to say something and ask investors something. It is important for investors to allow companies to have a long-term view, because people tend to be always in a hurry, you know, quarterly results, this and that. And I think that things need their time. And in order to beat the crisis, companies need to be judged because of their long-term projects and not because of their short-term results. And I want to finish by thanking all the investors who have participated in this forum. When we created it 12 years ago, we had 60 investors, and in this 12th edition, we've had more than 200. I'm very thankful to you for having participated in the meetings. I want to thank the CEOs and the financial managers of the different countries for being so transparent. And I also want to thank the government and the Spanish Prime Minister, because this has been an example of transparency by the government. We've had 12 vice presidents, we've had a minister, a secretary of state, a director general. We've had the government not only giving speeches, but also talking to investors, answering their questions. And today we are privileged enough to have the Prime Minister with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the President of the Spain Investors Day. I now give the floor to the Secretary of State for Trade and President of ICEX, Xiana Margarida Méndez.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, President of the Government of Spain, CEOs, representatives of companies and investment funds, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to this very prestigious event. I'm delighted to return to this forum once again. I think it's a forum that has been consolidating its presence as a key and very relevant date in the Spain's business calendar. In addition, I want to express also my gratitude to all the companies attending, especially to those that are coming from abroad in these very challenging times, and I hope that they are staying there, enjoying their stay here in Spain. This meeting is a unique opportunity to bring together in a very dynamic and emblematic segment of a Spanish financial and productive economy, together with important policymakers and also with investment funds and international investors in all. And this is why, since the very first edition of the Spain Investors Day, we have been supporting through ICEX Invest in Spain. In 2022, the Spain Investors Day maybe is more necessary than ever. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed significant constraints on the way the business are carried, and through the disruption on global value chains and restrictions on mobility. And Spain, like any other country, has, of course, suffered the severe consequences of the pandemic. But currently in Spain, we are clearly starting to see a continued economic recovery trend. Growth is accelerating. The labor market is showing a strong dynamism. And I am sure that maybe most of the companies that are attending this edition have already been able to benefit from this emerging growth environment. The external sector is also significantly contributing to the Spanish economy's recovery. After the strong decrease of the exports in 2020, in the worst months of the pandemic, we are seeing now, through the latest trade figures, that the Spanish exports are recovering. In fact, if we see the latest trade figures from January to October 2021, we can see that the exports have grown by 21.1% compared to the same period in 2020, and even more important than that, 6.1% compared to the same period in 2019. So Spanish trade flows not only have exceeded the pre-pandemic levels, but they have reached an all-time high of all the period. As a sign of the increasing global competitiveness of Spanish companies in a growing number of countries and their extraordinary resilience, geographical diversification of Spanish exports is also at an all-time high. And now we can see that 38% of total exports are going to non-European countries. And in addition to this, Spanish companies are becoming competitive in an increasing number of sectors too, not only goods, but services. Spain has notably changed the export mix to a higher degree of diversification, to a higher added value too. And I would like to mention biotechnology sector, for example, as a good example of this. The recovery of global trade and investment flows has been due in part to the successful process of vaccination in developed countries and in general, in Spain in particular, and both as a matter of solidarity with emerging and developed countries and to ensure also that the economic recovery keep the path. The collaboration of developed countries is essential to make sure that vaccines can reach all the corners of the world. In this regard, I would like to highlight how Spain and the European Union are contributing to this objective, with the EU becoming the world's leader exporter of COVID vaccines. And in this context, the biotechnology sector in Spain is gaining presence both nationally but also internationally, thanks to the good work of the companies in Spain. Spain is already the 8th world power in number of biotechnology documents, and the country's biotechnology companies have increased the launch of products and services by 70%. The development of this industrial fabric in Spain that is highly driven by foreign investment, in fact, favors a more resilient healthcare system that is better prepared for future challenges and is also generating wealth and a lot of quality employment. This goes hand in hand with the high development of Spain's business sector as a whole. There are top-notch Spanish companies established all over the world with state-of-the-art technologies in many industries, from infrastructure to renewable energy, from medicine and pharmaceuticals to automobile industry, agro-industry, fashion, tourism, also culture, financial services, software and communications. And the Spanish companies have the experience and the capacity necessary to become partners in all types of international projects throughout the world, even the biggest ones. And this is the case of some of the Spanish companies that are attending this edition. They are world leaders in the sectors that showcase perfectly well Spanish strong capabilities, cutting-edge technology, invaluable business know-how and international experience, and outstanding talent. In recent years, Spain is proving to be enormously attractive, as you said, Benito, to international investors. Spain has enjoyed a prodigious decade, both in terms of record figures, amounts, but also the quality of the projects that we receive. In 2021, Spain ranked third among the largest recipients of greenfield projects in the world, with 700 projects. It is also improving the position as FDI destination for innovative activities. In fact, according to FDI Markets, in 2021, Spain was the third largest recipient of innovative and high-end greenfield projects at a global level, just after the United States and the United Kingdom. And according to the same source, Spain was also the world's fourth destination of startups greenfield projects after the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany. The establishment of these kind of projects in Spain is key for the productivity and also the international competitiveness of our economy. I would also like to stress the growing importance of foreign investment in the Spanish entrepreneurship ecosystem, which is a reflection of the great appeal of Spain for foreign investors. The entrepreneurship ecosystem, specifically for innovation and disruptive business model, is experiencing the best moment to date in Spain. In the year 2020, in fact, there were in Spain more investment deals involving startups than in any other year before, with a notable increase in early-age rounds. In fact, in 2020, as I said, investment flows directed to Spain startups were well above 3,000 million euros, which is 3 times higher the amount, which was already a record, in 2019, so before the pandemic. Besides, Spain is also attractive for foreign portfolio investments, and the participation of non-resident investors in Spanish-listed companies accounted for even more of 50% of the total value, according to Bolsas y Mercados Españoles. In addition, Spain seeks to attract foreign direct investment with purpose and positive impact, and with sustainability as a fundamental vector in the investment process. In this regard, it is worth highlighting the growing importance we attach to environmental, social, and governance criteria, which fortunately a growing number of foreign investors are incorporating to their internationalization and investment strategies. So sustainability is also at the core of the business models of more and more Spanish companies, and in fact, this has allowed them to become world leaders in their respective sectors, as important as renewable energy, infrastructure, sanitation. So this places them in a position, an excellent position, to contribute decisively to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore they are exceptional partners for any foreign investor. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize once again how the external sector of the Spanish economy is in good health, that the recovery of the Spanish economy is underway, and the external sector continues to be a fundamental driver of the Spanish economy. And our best effort should be also dedicated to deepening the openness of our economy and fostering an environment that is attractive and can promote the global competitiveness of our companies. Finally, I would like just to remind you that at the Secretary of State for Trade, through ICEX Invest in Spain, we are ready to assist you in to make it easier to take the decisions in the investment projects, to make them come true, and our professional team will facilitate all the decision process when needed. So thank you very much.
Secretary of State, thank you very much for your words. President of Spain, Pedro Sánchez, yours is the floor.
Buenas tardes, Secretaria de Estado de
Secretary of
Comercio,
State for Trade, President of the Spain Investors Day, company representatives, and also representatives of different investment funds. Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this kind invitation to close this new edition of the Spain Investors Day. This forum has become a key milestone at the beginning of the financial year in Spain. And so I would like to congratulate the organizers of this event for that. I would like to share with you the wish that this year we might keep up our recovery from COVID-19. In the last 2 years, the response of the Spanish government has rested on several pillars. First of all, support of science. We've always been very clear that vaccination would be the remedy to the disease. Secondly, protection, reactivation, and transformation of our productive fabric, not only to consolidate economic growth, but also to consolidate it in the medium and long term. And finally, to lead together with other nations a response that needs to be multilateral to a global crisis. The political decision made by Spain to vaccinate the whole of the population as a way of protecting and relaunching our economy has been a success of our country. Just to give you some facts and figures, people over 12 years of age with a full vaccination scheme stand at 92.5%. A year ago, practically there was nobody vaccinated, and today 92.5% of our people have a full vaccination scheme. And people over 40, over 60% of people over 40 have received their booster dose. And 37% of children have at least received one dose. And by the first week of February, 70% of children younger than 11 will have at least one dose. And more importantly, and this is something that tells Spain apart from other countries, some of them even very close to us, is that in Spain there is no visible negationism as in other countries. The Spanish citizens have, they have come to consider vaccination as a duty, the duty to protect public health. Today we are facing the scourge of the Omicron variant, which is much more contagious. Scientists are telling us that it is less severe. And part of the reason for that is that many people have been vaccinated, and our figures, the latest figures, are pointing to a stabilization in the number of infections. And I would like to thank healthcare workers, especially those on the front line, for their great job, especially those of them in primary care centers. They are doing a Herculean job in order not only to preserve our healthcare system, but also to keep people safe. The government has strengthened our public health during the pandemic. But first of all, our situation is a lot different from what it was a year ago vis-à-vis COVID. We have made our mistakes, but we have moved steadily forward, thanks to the vaccination campaign and also thanks to the wonderful attitude of the Spanish population. And so with all the scientific rigor and on the basis of cooperation with other European countries, and on the basis of the duty that governments have to anticipate the different phases of the healthcare emergency, we should start building bridges to move towards a different stage. It is not going to happen overnight, but that time will come. And governments should anticipate that work and start working on that future. The vaccine, and you will share this idea with me, has been not only a wonderful political decision, but also a wonderful healthcare decision. But, as I was saying before, with the tools that we had when the virus emerged in our lives, we decided to defend our capital, our human capital, and our economic fabric. The first vice president of the government said that without the effort made by companies, workers, and public administrations, our GDP in 2020 would have fallen a lot more than 10%. It would probably have fallen by at least 20%. We mobilized, just to give you some facts and figures, we mobilized funds for over 135 billion euros. 135 billion. That is the effort made by Spain, providing hundreds of thousands of companies with liquidity, many of them SMEs, and also self-employed. We approved the furlough schemes, which protected almost 3.6 million workers. 95% of them have gone back to their jobs now. And we granted a special allowance to self-employed workers to prevent them from going bankrupt. We protected our self-employed workers through thick and thin, and we also approved subsidies for companies for 11 billion euros, which were used to sustain small businesses in the hospitality business, tourism, and sectors that were very heavily affected by the restrictions that we were forced to introduce. So, public powers and the Spanish government implemented an economic policy that was very novel. First of all, to fight COVID, but also to reactivate our economy, and finally, to consolidate our growth. So our will was very clear. We went the whole hog to protect our companies and our workers, and I think that we can be confident that the result has been more than reasonably positive. The third pillar, together with vaccination and with the protection given through the furlough schemes and the ICO loans, has been the European Union. Benita mentioned that the response given to this crisis was completely different to the response given to the financial crisis of 2008. The Union gave a completely different response. For example, the centralized procurement of vaccines by the European Union, which accelerated research, manufacturing, and delivery of the doses to the member states. And one of the main achievements of the European construction has been that big Marshall Plan, which is represented by the Next Generation EU funds. These funds entail a huge opportunity. It is a golden opportunity to modernize Europe and Spain. It's 750 billion euros devoted to investment, reforms, and policies which Europe has defined very clear vectors for in that new digital and green economy that we're all moving into. Next generation funds have been the greatest breakthrough in European integration this century, not only because of the sheer amount mobilized, but also because it entails a new paradigm in European construction, which is based on the mutualization of the debt across the different member states. The results of these measures, that is, vaccination, the monetary policy, and the centralized procurement of vaccines, confirm the efficacy and the equity of the European response. You know that all economies in the Eurozone will have recovered their GDP levels in 2022. Many of them did so in 2021. In Spain, our economy is going through a very vigorous recovery, as published by INE. Growth was over 6% in the third quarter 2021. And in the last quarter, the growth rate was in excess of 2%. So the global figure for 2021 was over 5%. And for 2022, most organizations forecast growth rates of over 5%, the second highest in the European Union. But those are forecasts. Of course, they're very positive, but they're still forecasts. We'll see how things go. It all depends on how things play out. But what reflects better than any other indicator the robustness of the Spanish recovery is the wonderful evolution of employment. It is unprecedented. In just a year and a half, we managed to recover pre-pandemic employment levels. Just remember how long it took to recover the employment levels of the pre-2008 crisis. Never in the history of our life had there been so many people affiliated to our national insurance system. This is testament of the collective success that we have all scored. And this 10 months have been the longest period in terms of unemployment reduction. So this means that all of these things are extremely encouraging, and they have been possible thanks to the effort of the government, the effort of companies, the efforts of workers. And so we can conclude that the Spanish economy is faced with a very solid growth path. And this growth will help us intensify our reform agenda and public investment from European funds. Spain, together with Portugal, during the pro-tempore presidency of Portugal in 2021, we were the first two countries in the European Union to submit our plans to the Commission. The Spanish plan was already approved, and we were the first to submit our application and receive the first installment. Spain has already received 19 billion euros. The plan has 70 billion euros of transfers for the first 4 years, 70 billion for reforms across 4 axes, which are the axes established by the European Union in our agreement with them and in the strategy approved for this mandate, which will finish in 2024, which is ecological transition, digital transformation, territorial cohesion, and gender equality, which are going to be the priorities for the near future. And to this amount, the government is going to add another 70 billion euros in loans, which are going to be applied for by the Spanish government before June 2023. So it's going to be 140 trillion in public investments. And to give you an idea, this accounts for 93% of the structural funds that Spain received between 1986 and 2020. So it's a very large amount of money, which is going to entail a huge opportunity. In 6 years, Spain is going to invest a lot of money in renewing its productive fabric. as much money as was invested, as I said, by the sustainability funds over a very long period of time. And those funds, many of you will remember, played a very important role. In Spain, we have one of the greatest high-speed train networks, one of the greatest road networks. So this money, of course, will not be invested so much in infrastructures, but in modernizing our productive fabric. And this will entail a huge opportunity for Spain to promote the green and digital reindustrialization of Spain. We want to change the production model, make it more balanced, and we also want to improve our human capital. The implementation of European funds is already a reality. We started working on these European funds in June last year. So we have been working on them for over 6 months. In 2021, 91% of that, over 24 billion euros, have been authorized, and payments are being made for over 11 billion euros. So the different administrations have been making a huge effort. 45.5% of the budget has already been executed. And the first half of this year, we are going to open 150 different calls to make a huge amount of money available to Spanish companies. And this will not only modernize our economic fabric, but will provide many opportunities for many companies. And like we did with COVID, we want to facilitate public-private partnerships in the use of those funds. And a fundamental tool to do this is the so-called strategic projects. These are programs directed to strategic sectors: the automotive sector, healthcare, renewable energies, aerospace, the naval sector, and the primary sector, agriculture, and of course the Spanish language, which is one of the most important languages in the world. And to these strategic projects, in the different conversations we've had with different levels of government and with the private sector, we are adding new projects, for example, to do with the care economy, management of nursing homes. Now we have a very costly system that doesn't really protect our elderly properly, and there we want to open up public-private partnership. Also a strategic project on water, which is a very important challenge for humanity, and a strategic project on circular economy that the government is already working on. And against this background, I would like to mention that the commitment of the Spanish government with ecologic transition is undoubtable. Our endeavor has been very much linked with the green economy. The different companies have been asking this for a long time. They have been clamoring for new regulatory frameworks, and we're going to do that. We're also going to introduce a comprehensive climate and energy plan, which has received accolades from different European institutions. And then the economic and the energy transition is also very important. We have a roadmap for green hydrogen, which was approved recently, self-consumption, or the auctions of renewable energies, which we are promoting to increase the penetration of renewable energies in our grid. This view is based not only on the commitment of the Spanish government with the fight against climate change, but Spain could become an exporter of clean energy. Of course, there will be interconnections to be made, and we will have to talk to our French friends, but the Spanish government in this energy transition believes that clean energies might be a way for Spain to cease to be an energy importer and become an exporter of clean energy. These European funds are also going to help us promote reindustrialization and digitalization of our economy, especially in sectors where we are already committing resources, and we're going to be introducing laws in this respect in the next few months. We already announced a legislative calendar for this year. The laws will include a 5G law. Now we're also promoting artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. The deployment of 5G is going to be very much extensive in the next few months. And we have a competitive advantage because we have the most extensive optical fiber network in the world. And I also want to mention that together with the European funds, the Spanish government in the last 2 years has been promoting a reform-based agenda. Our government is a European government, and we deeply believe in reform. In my inauguration speech, I announced an ambitious structural reforms program to modernize our country, a program that would be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and the strategic agenda of the European Union. So the different reforms introduced by the government are aligned with the reforms established by the European Union, and this is what we have been promoting in the last 2 years. If we want to beat the crisis, we need to transform our production model. We need to reindustrialize our country. And unlike what happened in 2008, now we have public investment available. So to do this, we need to increase our human capital, of course. That's why we're introducing a new education law, which is a law that is going to change the curricula. It is going to change the training of teachers. It is going to help digitalize our classrooms. So I think that all of these things are extremely important. We shouldn't forget vocational training. We have promoted a new vocational training law that has had wide support in Spanish Parliament. And we will also renew our science law. And we are also immersed in reforming our active employment policies. We need to reindustrialize our country. Spain meets all the conditions to become a renewable energy leader for the present and the future, and the Spanish government will support the sector with no reserves. From the regulatory point of view, I already mentioned what steps we have taken with the climate change law and with the National Energy and Climate Plan. I take these things very seriously, and I think politicians should explain to investors what the priorities of the government are. And one of the priorities of our government is mitigation and adaptation to climate change. A couple of days ago, a report was published where governments were saying that climate change will be one of the greatest challenges for the economy in the next 10 years. And if nothing is done, the world GDP could go down by 1/6. So we're talking about a very important problem which also affects the economic performance of countries. So we need to accelerate the energy transition and the transformation of our economy. From the point of view of digitalization, as the Secretary of State was saying, I think we should escalate the dimension of our companies, of our business fabric. This is one of the most significant shortcomings of our country when it comes to internationalizing. We're immersed in a new receivership law. We have been trying to modernize our system for many years. This law is going to make it possible for many entrepreneurs to have a second opportunity. And then there's going to be a startup law, which is going to be a highly ambitious law to try and attract investments in the digital world. And we have approved a telecommunications law, which is going to contribute to territory cohesion, and it is going to help us achieve high-speed connectivity to all Spanish citizens by 2025. So this reform agenda has extended to all the different sectors of our economy. In a few days' time, we will approve a draft housing law which seeks to promote housing in our country, the improvement of competitiveness and sustainability of the tourist sector, the food chain law to ensure the sustainability of the primary sector, and also, more on a social note, the increase of the minimum wage, which is so important for a country like ours. So the bulk of these reforms, have been possible without making any impositions to the affected sector. Because for us, consensus is extremely important. It is important for us, and it is important for the economy. And if we speak about social dialogue is not just a means to an end. It is an end in itself, because negotiating, coming to agreements, is doing good politics. And it is a way of guaranteeing social peace, which is fundamental and which is something that citizens lay great store by. And the reformist spirit cannot be based upon a unilateral imposition of one set of interests over another. State policies such as pensions, labor market, require stability. They require legal certainty, and that can only be achieved with large-scale agreements. And I want to thank the commitment of entrepreneurs and workers in this respect, because we feel very proud of the agreements we have reached, especially with our employment law. We have had to reform the employment law to address different imbalances in our previous model. For example, in our country, 1/3 of jobs were, based on contracts of less than 5 days. We need to move towards a model that is based on competitiveness and on stability. Therefore, we need to incentivize permanent contracts. we need to fight youth unemployment, promoting internal flexibility mechanisms, which have been very well appreciated by companies, and the chairman was mentioning this. Internal flexibility mechanisms have been a novel response, because in the past, the only response was redundancies. But in this new reform, there's a new mechanism that is going to also perfect furlough schemes, also regulating outsourcing, so that outsourcing is not used to devaluate the working conditions of our workers. And collective bargaining is also placed at the heart of the system. I think that this new reform of the job market addresses the main weaknesses of our job market. It strengthens legal certainty for our companies, and it strikes a good balance between flexibility and protection of our human capital. And it is a good reform because it is based on social agreement. An agreement where the different parties had to make concessions. It is not the ideal reform of the government, it is not the ideal reform of employers or of workers, but that's precisely why it is so good, because it incorporates a fundamental element, which is that of predictability and legal certainty. Well, I'm convinced that the political players are going to be as generous as social agents when this law comes to the Spanish Parliament. We are living through complex times. There's many lessons that we need to learn. And perhaps we could talk about this next year, perhaps in a different setting, dear Benito. But one of the main lessons that I have extracted from this crisis, which I would like to share with you, is that there can't be individual progress if there's no collective progress. That is why it is so important to work. The private sector, the public sector should work to dignify the living conditions of our society. High-quality education, employability of our young people, job stability, fair salaries, decent old-age pensions. All of these things are extremely important for society. And of course, personal fulfillment, social mobility. You know, these are very important elements. And after the financial crisis of 2008, many people were just, excluded. So, to summarize, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to science and thanks to vaccination, which, in my view, is the main political decision that Europe made to face up to the COVID-19 crisis, together with vaccination and the management of European funds as a huge opportunity to modernize the economy, and the agreement to launch a series of structural reforms that might bind society together. These are some of the tools that we have used to face up to the present and the future of Spain and Europe. Our project for Spain is to make sure that our economy grows, that our competitiveness grows. Consolidated the growth we have achieved requires consensus, a lot of dialogue in a society that is becoming more and more complex, and governing this complexity has become an asset. And together with this, political and institutional stability is also decisive. Spain should consolidate its stability in order to be able to embark on all the reforms that the country needs. In the last 2 years, our government has approved a very long list of reforms in Parliament and outside Parliament, with social partners, with the different regional governments, with the support of over 15 political parties. And they are all very important because they gave an answer to the economic and social challenges that the country was facing. And so, as the Secretary of State was saying, and I'm sure that many of my colleagues have said it, I think that foreign direct investment plays a key role. Spain is and will be an attractive place for international investment. According to the OECD, Spain is the 9th most open country to foreign investment. These figures speak for themselves. In 2019, the productive investment stock was over 480 billion euros. That is 40% of the annual GDP. And Spain, I would just like to mention something very important. In 2020, which was a very difficult year, the global overall FDI fell by 41% in Spain, but it was 71% in Europe. So this figure shows many things, but particularly the foreign investors were able to appreciate the huge potential of the Spanish economy, which was facing a very difficult time. And I'm sure that this vision will become stronger in the future. I would like to conclude by repeating my conviction that we have already gone through the toughest part of this healthcare emergency. We have in front of us complex times, but we have the strong will of the Spanish government to make the most of the opportunities and promote our agenda to modernize our country. Given our geopolitical situation, given the robustness of our institutions, of course, we have a robust democracy, very solid institutions, and we also have high-quality transport and digital infrastructures. And so Spain has, for many years, been a prime investment target. And thanks to the strategy adopted during the pandemic, and thanks to the response given to Europe by the COVID-19 crisis, I'm sure that this reality will acquire a new dimension. We are embarked on a historical transformation project to correct our imbalances and strengthen our opportunities. And I would like to ask you to join us in this adventure, because I can assure you that investing in Spain is well worth it. Thank you.